You are listening to the Redesign Your Life podcast. I'm your host, Lynn Grogan. I am a certified life coach, and each week I am going to help you take imperfect action toward creating a fulfilling and meaningful life. Are you ready? Let's go. Hey all, welcome back to the podcast, or if it is your first time here, welcome for the first time. I'm your host, Lynn Grogan. I'm a life coach and I'm a nomad. So my husband and I travel full-time in our RV, and in general, I am a helper. I love helping people make their lives better through the process of coaching. So if you've been with me for a while, you'll notice this podcast has a new name. So for the first 42 episodes, this show is called the Courageously Unconventional podcast, where we explore living life on your own terms and staying true to yourself. And I love that theme, but over time, my focus started shifting. We grow as we learn. And I found myself talking more and more about what it looks like to create a life you love and then take action to making that happen. So I knew I wanted to change things up, and I played with a lot of different ideas, but when I landed on the name Redesign Your Life, it just felt right. Instantly, I had so many ideas about how to help you create a life that's fulfilling, and I just knew I wanted to go in that direction. So as I played around with the idea, I also felt compelled to add a tagline. So it's Redesign Your Life, one imperfect step at a time. And because it seemed like simply calling it Redesign Your Life, I don't know, there was something about that just sounded so prescriptive. Like I was going to hand you this master plan for a perfect life. And that is not what I believe in. I don't think that actually exists. And that is not what I am here to do. I want to help you figure that out for yourself. And I'd like to think of this podcast as a resource to help you do that, to help you live life as an experiment that evolves over time. All right, so with that said, for the rest of this episode, I do want to talk about a few things since this is sort of like a welcome back episode. So first, I want to cover what the heck do I mean by redesigning your life? Second, why I think taking imperfect action matters so much. Third, how to use this podcast to help yourself. Fourth, when it might make sense to hire a coach versus just listening. And fifth, I'm going to share my next imperfect action and encourage you to do the same. All right, so the first thing, here's what I mean by redesigning your life. If you told me, hey Lynn, I am going to redesign my home, I'd have a pretty good idea of what that means. So you'd likely take the space you're currently living in and you'd be reimagining it or remodeling it. So I'm just picturing you standing in your living room and you're starting to ask what if I knocked down that wall? What if the couch went over there? Or what if this wasn't a living room at all, but like this yoga space filled with plants and one of those gurgly Zen fountains? I think it's easy-ish to wrap your head around the idea of transforming a space. But when it comes to redesigning your life, it can feel much harder. Why? Because you're in it. You're busy living life. And that's where I can be helpful. So each week, this podcast will give you a chance to pause and take a step back and explore big picture questions about your life. But at the same time, I'm also going to challenge you to take imperfect steps forward, no matter how big or small, to see what happens. Because let's be real, change doesn't happen on its own. You actually have to do something to create change in your life. But sometimes that something is a shift in how you think. Other times it might be reaching out for help, or maybe you're just going to commit to walking a few more steps, or maybe you're going to put those first words of that story down on a paper. I know from my many years of experience as both a human and a coach, taking action is where people typically get stuck. A lot of times it just stays in your head as an idea. But when it doesn't have to be perfect, when you're okay with imperfection, you can just get going. All right, so how can this podcast help you? How can I help you? So at its core, I hope this podcast gives you ideas that you can actually use in your life. That's why I listen to podcasts. I love learning and gathering new perspectives. But I also know there comes a point where listening may not be enough and you want to hire a coach to help you make some changes in your life. And that's the other reason why this podcast exists, why I make it every week. It's so that you and I can get to know each other. So if there's a time when you want extra support, you know what you could expect of me as a coach. We already have a relationship sort of because you listen to me and you have a sense of how I could help you. So to be clear, I don't think everyone needs a coach or frankly has access to the resources to pay for coaching. Sometimes simply listening to a podcast and reflecting on it is going to be perfect for wherever you are in life, and you can get a lot of help that way. But for the times where it would be helpful to have extra support, here are 4 reasons why you might want to make that decision instead of going it alone. 1, you want accountability. Like when you know you're meeting with a coach regularly, you start thinking about what you want to work on, and that helps you move forward. 2, you might feel like stuck or paralyzed. So you maybe know that something in your life isn't working, but you have no idea how to fix it, or, it's hard to even go there. And a coach can help you gain clarity and take action. 3, you know what you need to do, but you're scared to take the leap. So this is definitely where I've been a lot of times in my life. So fear and that anxiety can keep you from making changes that will help things, will improve things. And a coach can help you navigate that resistance. And 4, maybe you're already making a lot of changes, but the emotional roller coaster is real. Even when you're moving forward, it can be tough because you're making a lot of changes. And a coach can help support you through the ups and downs. So if at any point you find yourself going, yeah, I could use some extra support in those ways, you can find details on how to get in touch with me in the show notes. All right. And finally, every week I am going to end the podcast with a challenge for you to take some sort of imperfect action that week. And to help you out, I'm going to share some tangible examples. Sometimes these will be from my own life. Sometimes they'll be drawn from examples from my client calls, sometimes from podcast listeners or other things I've been reading. But in general, the idea will be to inspire you to take your own imperfect action. All right, so to get the ball rolling, I'm going to share something from my life. So this week, my imperfect action I'm going to commit to is using my resistance band one time. So we have been carrying around this set of bright orange resistance bands for almost 2 years, and we've only used them a few times. And so what I did is I went and found a short YouTube workout video. I'm going to watch it. I'm going to try out the bands, and I'm not going to worry about doing it perfectly. I'm just going to grab the lightest one, the one that's almost so silly because it's so small, and just try to replicate what the trainer is doing. And I'm going to let that be good enough. And honestly, if the full, I think it's 20 minutes, seems like a lot, I'm going to be fine with 5 minutes. All right. So that's what I'm going to commit to. That feels like a step forward, but also imperfect. And I'm going to let you know how it goes next week. All right. So now it's your turn. So think about something this could be anything that you want to be different in your life. So what is one imperfect action you can take over this next week? So maybe you also have a piece of exercise equipment you never use and you want to give it a go. And then 2, what is the smallest, most doable step to move you in the direction you want to go? You'll know it's doable because it seems easy enough, almost too easy, and you could do it in the next hour or day, and you feel very little resistance to doing it. The important thing here is you're doing something. It doesn't matter how big or small. And so if you're able to, after you figure out what that thing is, say it out loud, what you're planning to do, and then commit to doing it in the next week. And feel free to let me know how it goes. So you can email me, lynn@lynngrogan.com. You can DM me on Instagram. I'm @lynngrogan. I'm going to have those links in the show notes. I would just love to hear what you feel inspired to do. Alrighty, that is it for today. If you find this podcast helpful, share it with a friend. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next week.